Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast. My name is John, and we are back to talk about the incredible news that's been taking place in the Star Wars universe over the last week and a half or so. Super bummed we were not able to get our immediate reactions to the most recent news last weekend, but we had some stuff come up and we couldn't record. We're here today. It's going to be myself and Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, and Tyler's there in the background recording us once again. So our fame and fortune continues to rise here in the world of independent documentary filmmaking. Anyway, let's jump into the news. I think we have a ton to talk about today, Ryan. So there's just like earth-shattering, like life-changing Star Wars news that took place a week ago from Thursday, which is first off the announcement of Rian Johnson creating an all-new Star Wars trilogy. I was at work. I saw the updates, and I lost my mind. I absolutely lost my mind.
And that's why it took us a week and a half to record this.
Yeah, it was until now that I recovered
You've been locked up in an asylum.
Yeah, but I mean, it really is. It's not quite on the level of 2012. Hey, Disney's buying Lucasfilm and Episode 7 is on the way, but it's in that vicinity, I feel like, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were wondering like what happens next after this sequel trilogy. And I believe I said on this show to look towards Last Jedi for hints at like what the next trilogy is going to be. I thought that would be more like in the film, and it still might be, but I guess we just need to look at the director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Rian Johnson, and you know, we did our show when JJ was announced as director of Episode 9, and it was like, okay, well, JJ's awesome, and we're pretty excited, but had sort of been thinking maybe it would be Rian Johnson. And definitely saw some of those hold my beer memes, you know, like, you know, oh, JJ's directing Episode 9, I'll hold my beer, I got a whole trilogy, you know.
Yeah.
So it's almost like something better for Rian Johnson, or something bigger, I guess we'll say. Let's talk about what the news is. I mean, like I said, it broke a week and a half ago, so probably anybody listening knows what the news is, but I want to read exactly what it was, just so we have that specific language to work from. So the press release said that Rian Johnson will create a brand new Star Wars trilogy, the first of which he's also set to write and direct, with longtime collaborator Ram Bergman on board to produce. So in its most basic form, that is the news. He is creating a new trilogy, and he's writing and directing the first film in that trilogy and working with his producing partner. So, I mean, I think that's pretty close to, or pretty similar to, what a lot of us thought we were going to get with JJ with The Force Awakens. Like, okay, he's on board to write and direct the first one, but he's probably going to be very involved with the whole trilogy. It's come back around now to the point where it almost is that way, but it didn't seem like that would be the case at first. So, but I do think it's important to clarify that, you know, the press release states it, but he is only writing and directing at this point the first of these three movies. Because I have heard, you know, some misinformation about that, or some misunderstandings, I think, in terms of like the idea that he's, you know, just going to do 3 Star Wars movies. Actually, it would be 4 Star Wars movies in a row, which, I mean, that would be pretty crazy, I feel like.
Yeah. I don't think no one has done that.
Yeah. No.
Not even George Lucas.
No. Well, yeah, no, not really. Not if you, I mean, he did A New Hope, and then, you know, the next 3 movies he directed were Star Wars movies, but they were 20 years later. So, so sort of, but not really.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's important to note here, or the thing that's, I think, really kind of crazy exciting about this, is that it's a new trilogy separate from the Skywalker saga, introducing new characters from a corner of the galaxy never explored before. And that's something that, too, like, we have the benefit here of, it's been a week and a half, so you've kind of heard all the different takes on this and seen how people have reacted, but I think a little bit of that got lost in translation for people, at least initially, the idea that this is a new and separate trilogy of films with new characters from a new corner of the galaxy. because I think it's just human nature, or it's just the way people tend to react. But when the news first broke, it was like, oh, well, maybe it's going to be about this character that we already know, or maybe it's going to be set during this event that I'm already aware of, and I don't think that'll really be the case based on the language being used here.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like characters that have not been, or like time periods that have not been explored on film.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to tell from that language like what they're talking about, and what like what Lucasfilm considers unexplored, because over the course of 40 years, a lot has been explored. And I wonder if it's like a lot of eras have been explored, and I wonder if like they're just, if it happened in the EU, like whatever.
Because anything that's been explored in the EU would not be considered canon, so you could technically say that it hasn't been explored yet, right?
Yeah,
that's a possibility. We might as well just address the small elephant in the room, or at least that was in a lot of rooms at the time of the announcement, which is that it could be Knights of the Old Republic. That's like, it seems like that's the strongest desired topic for this from or like the most vocal segment of the fan base wants it to be Knights of the Old Republic, which I think is actually maybe a more likely candidate for the TV show than for this set of films. But
yeah,
we could see, but yeah, that language says like, okay, it's going to be a new and separate trilogy. It's going to be new characters. The other thing is that, with Kathleen Kennedy's press blurb that came out on StarWars.com or whatever it was, one of the things she said is that Rian will do amazing things with this blank canvas of this trilogy. And I think, to me, that really indicates like, no, this is actually new. It's not like new the way Timothy Zahn's new Thrawn book is new because it's like a new canon thing and the old one's not canon. I think it's going to be new. And I think that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, like a reimagining of the Old Republic era, but I think if people are expecting like a 1-to-1 adaptation of like the old Dark Horse comics or something, like it's definitely not going to be that. It's not going to be the BioWare game or the Obsidian sequel. Like it's, if it is set in like that era, I think it will be like a wholly new imagining of what that is. But like, I do see that being like a strong possibility though, that like it's going to go way, way back. Especially with so much of The Last Jedi seeming to be centered around, Luke's discoveries on Ahch-To with the first Jedi Temple.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be really cool. Like if he was inspired while writing and creating The Last Jedi to say, Luke's discovered all this lore and mythology. Nobody's really laid out what that is yet. I could be the guy. And as I'm creating this backstory for Luke and for what Luke's going to find on Ahch-To, maybe he just like a lot of ideas came to him in terms of, what he could do with that. So, and it's interesting to consider too, like if this is something that Lucasfilm solicited from Rian Johnson, or if this was something where Rian Johnson said, hey, I've got a great idea for a new trilogy. And they were like, we love you, so go for it.
Yeah.
I feel like it was probably the latter. I feel like he was probably creatively inspired to do this. And they were like, okay, well, you made an awesome movie. So go ahead and do it, And in terms of our like reaction and speculation, because that's where, we've talked about what exactly the news is. For the notes, the way I structured it here, like, I broke it up now into reaction and speculation. Well, the first thing I put there is like, what a crazy, incredible endorsement of The Last Jedi it is to give this guy 3 movies, or at least creative oversight of 3 movies before The Last Jedi is even out. I think it means very good things in terms of that movie and what we can expect from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's definitely something that Lucasfilm like sees and likes about Last Jedi in order to be like, hey, like we like the cut of your jib. Like, why don't you make 3 more or spearhead 3 more?
Yeah, for sure. And like the thing with I've been thinking about it in the last week and a half, thinking about like what we know about Rian Johnson and who we kind of think Rian Johnson is as a creative person, and the idea that he would want to jump like right back into Star Wars and do another Star Wars movie and kind of be sounds like pretty significantly involved in 3 more Star Wars movies. To me, that's like another reason I think it's going to be very original, because he just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would be, I don't know how to put it necessarily, but like a genre guy who just wants to make like comic book or science fiction movies like for the rest of his career or something. And that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But I just feel like he is a pretty original guy. He's a writer and a director. And I just feel like if he wants to do another Star Wars movie, if he's inspired to do another Star Wars movie, I feel like it's most likely that it would be something that's very him. You know what I mean? I hate to be cliche and use the word auteur or whatever, but like it feels like he is that kind of director where he's not out running around just looking for the next highest paying job, but where he's got things to say as a filmmaker. And if he's going to choose to do that in Star Wars, I think it'll be because he's got, things that he wants to say through these movies, or he wants to make them with his own voice and probably do something really creative and new, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing that's cool about this for me is that, when they announced the sequel trilogy, and I've talked about this a bunch on the show, I was super negative downer guy about it. I didn't want it. And part of the reason is I was just so convinced that Star Wars was all about being like George Lucas's vision, in that it had this like, this one creative vision for these films, and the idea that they were just going to like hand them off to whoever wanted to come in and make a, high grossing film or movie or whatever, I wasn't excited about. But it is pretty intriguing and pretty exciting to think that maybe they've found somebody who is not going to be like, the next George Lucas in terms of the guy in charge of Star Wars, but somebody who's going to be really involved in directing the future of like where Star Wars goes, So I don't know if he's going to be the next JJ, the next George Lucas, or somewhere in between. But I think it's definitely, it's comforting to know that there's somebody kind of plotting it all out. There's somebody who's the sort of final or the first voice, I guess, creatively speaking, with all that stuff.
And I mean, it almost felt like throughout this process, like Lucasfilm was kind of looking for the next George Lucas in a way. They were looking for like a young filmmaker who had made some like mildly successful, high concept, like not quite independent, well, like semi-independent films. Someone with like a vision, a voice, and you can see that like with some of the people they had signed on, people like Gareth Edwards and such. Like they were like, that seemed to be like the pool that they were pulling from for directors. And maybe they found the one that really clicked.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is also inspiring hope for this new trilogy, is the idea that like, if you look at what they've done with the spin-off movies and what they've been, even with hiring Rian Johnson in the first place to do The Last Jedi, they seem like they are looking for fresh ideas, young, hungry, creative talent to do these movies. And they want they want filmmakers who can bring something fresh to it. And even though they've definitely had some difficulties with that, and there's been some struggles with that approach, that does seem to be what they want. And so, I think finding that in Rian Johnson in a way that feels new and fresh, but also feels Star Wars is probably where the problem was with some of the other guys. They could bring in fresh and interesting and creative voices, but then getting those fresh and creative voices to kind of mesh with Star Wars in a way that makes sense was difficult. But it seems like with Rian Johnson, it wasn't difficult at all. So, he seems to get what they're going for. And, it's just kind of like the way I'm interpreting it or the way a lot of us are seeing it. But it seems like what they want is they want it to be Star Wars, but they also want it to be filtered through, an interesting new, younger kind of perspective and a younger and interesting, I mean, it doesn't have to be young, but you know what I mean? Like a fresh kind of voice in terms of filmmaking. So that's good. It's not like the factory model, like get a guy who can make blockbusters, give him a movie, pump it out. That doesn't seem to be what they're going for.
Yeah.
It was a little scary with Trevorrow. It seemed like maybe that's what they were doing with Trevorrow.
But I mean, he had done Safety Not Guaranteed before, which was, I don't love that movie, but it was like that it fell in that genre and of like, somewhat high concept, somewhat independent film.
By the way, you watched Looper last weekend, right? Is that?
I did not end up watching Looper. I have it. We have it on Blu-ray and we've never watched it. Okay. I'm going to watch it before I see The Last Jedi.
Well, you texted me the picture of the movie and said you were going to watch it. And I was like, that's awesome. I'm curious to know what you think. But at the same time, like I've gone this long without seeing any of his movies, which is kind of embarrassing and doesn't make any sense, but it's true. And so now I'm like, well, I don't want to like color my expectations any further before seeing The Last Jedi. Like I just want to see The Last Jedi and then love it, and then go watch his old movies and be like, oh yeah, see, I can see the seeds of everything I love in The Last Jedi. Or if I go watch the old ones and I'm like, well, I don't like those. I don't want to be like, it won't matter. After I already loved The Last Jedi, like his previous movies could be horrible and I won't care. So that's kind of where, but I'm a fickle guy. So
yeah.
Well, let's talk about what we'd like to see in this new trilogy of movies. What do you think about No Skywalkers? Because it sounds like No Skywalkers.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
You're fine with that? Okay. Dan couldn't be here today, but he left a comment on our notes last week saying that it's kind of what he was hoping for since Disney bought Lucasfilm. The idea that like, hey, you can't just keep like at a certain point, it's going to be ridiculous to keep doing trilogies or movies about the Skywalker family. So he's very much down for a Skywalker-less saga. I think that's cool too. I'm fine with it. What are you hoping to see? Like we talked about maybe having it set way in the past, or we talked about where it could be set. But are there things that you're like really hoping to see in a new trilogy of Star Wars movies? Kind of like all restrictions taken off of the franchise here. Like, are there things you really are hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say now because there's so much Star Wars media on the way that this would have been like a totally different question if there wasn't there wasn't just so much. So I don't know, like I think like I really like I love Rogue One, and I really liked that sort of ensemble cast, like more like less mythical, more grounded style stories set in the Star Wars universe. Something I really love from the EU are the MedStar duology of books, which are a bunch of doctors. It's basically like MASH in the Star Wars universe, but I think something like that would be obviously better for like maybe the TV series that we're going to talk about. So kind of what it comes down to is like, you know, the trilogy, like a trilogy. I mean, it's are will these be considered saga films, or are these Star Wars stories, or are they their own thing? Um, you know, I think kind of like they sort of have to be if they are going to be like numbered. I mean, what is the approach going to be to these? Like, I think they would have to kind of incorporate all the elements that you think of when you think of like core Star Wars, and like less on the periphery. So you'd probably want, family drama. You'd probably want lightsabers. You'd probably want space battles, want weird aliens. You want a lived-in universe. I think like those are kind of, to me, like the biggest components of like the core Star Wars franchise. So I think like time period doesn't necessarily matter too much. I like the Old Republic era. The interpretation we saw of it in the EU, I like it a lot because it kind of evokes like a medieval fantasy type vibe in a lot of ways. And I like that element of it, but I also think like something in the far future would be interesting as well, or something. I mean, it would be, if they are talking like new characters and stuff, like I couldn't really see it set in the like 40-year time frame that the saga films are. Like, even if they were like, well, these movies are set in the Outer Rim during the Battle of Yavin era or something, because I think there would be that temptation to bring in those saga characters, and then it kind of in a way defeats the purpose. So I think it would have to be set closer to at like an extreme of the time periods.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Part of me wonders if there's a way they can get away with not defining the time period, at least initially. The snag with that is like the Republic and the Empire, or whatever, the First Order and the Resistance and all that kind of stuff. Like it would probably have to address like the state of galactic affairs in some way. So then that's going to kind of define where it's at timeline wise. But otherwise, I think it would be interesting to just kind of introduce new characters and a new story, and not necessarily define when it's happening. And then perhaps there's a possibility that it could intersect in some way 10 years from now with like, some other element of the Star Wars saga. I like the idea of it being new and totally fresh and different now, but potentially having the opportunity to cross paths with something else. Part of me wonders if it'll be set in the unknown regions. I don't know anything about the unknown regions. That's why they're unknown. But like, what's that like? You know what I mean? And that's a completely blank slate as a blank canvas.
Kind of like it's been. We've gotten a little bit of it in the new canon novels.
But isn't all we've gotten is that like there's a First Order like Star Destroyer out there, and like that's where they kind of like all came together to sort of wait in the wings. But like I don't know like what planets are there, or what like the society there is like. I mean, it's not governed by the First Order or the Empire or the Republic, right? It's like it's almost like it's so far away that like and the characters in the books and stuff, like don't they talk about it like they don't know what's out there, right? So I don't know though, because
that is definitely a possibility, and maybe that's like what has been like, maybe that's been something that they've been wanting to set up like the Lucasfilm story group, and like, you know, maybe this was already in mind this whole time.
Possible. Although that being said, I kind of think I'm with you in that I might like it best if it was set way back. But part of the reason is, you know, Star Wars is like this mix of science fiction and fantasy, right? And for me, with it being a new trilogy and a blank canvas and all that stuff, if it's going to veer in one direction or the other, you know, like you brought up Rogue One, which is kind of like veers away from the fantasy aspect and the mysticism and stuff. I think I would like to see it veer in the other direction as a trilogy, like, or as a I don't know, story setup, whatever. I'd like to see it go more in the direction of fantasy. Like I'm thinking almost like, you know, more of a Lord of the Rings type thing, but set in the Star Wars like universe. I think would be really cool. And I think that's the kind of thing that I could see somebody like Rian Johnson potentially getting excited about. And if you go way back, then there's obviously the opportunity for that. I think that'd be really cool. And, you know, we'll see. I mean, I guess that's a possibility, but yeah, I want from it. I think it will be a trilogy. I don't know if it would be a numbered part of the saga, but I feel like it would be, it should, I hope, retain the feeling of, you know, like mainstream, like vanilla is not the right word, but like, you know, your standard Star Wars type of story. Rogue One can be different. Han Solo can be different. Obi-Wan even could be different, you know, or the live action show could be about the underworld, or it could be about the Old Republic, or it could be about a lot of things, and could be different genres and different types of stories. But for this, I want it to be, I think, still the core Star Wars thing, which is to be mythic and to have an element of science fiction, but also an element of fantasy. But I think there's the opportunity where, like I said, they could bend it one way or the other a little bit, but you should still kind of have those, all the key elements of Star Wars, you know, in terms of music and the feel and the, you know, the storytelling. And I feel like, why set it up as a trilogy if it's not going to kind of follow that sort of, you know, hero's journey type thing and all that stuff. It seems like the direction they'll go. But I just, you know, the idea of it not having to be connected to anything else is just really exciting, because it could be in that format and in that style. It could be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool too, because, you know, we know Disney's going to be doing more Star Wars forever, and we have Episode 9 on the horizon, even though Episode 8's not even out yet, but Episode 9's on the horizon. And then, you know, a set of 3 movies, a trilogy, is so exciting. But the idea that like Episode 10 would come 2 years or 3 years or 4 years after Episode 9 is a little bit off-putting to me, because they can't be that special if they are just one after the other in terms of like these big saga movies. But then I don't really want 10 years of just standalone movies either necessarily. So the idea of a separate trilogy that could also be epic and exciting, but in a different way, and not feel like just more of the Skywalker saga, I think that's kind of perfect.
Yeah, have that fill the gaps, and then, you know, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, bring back Rey and Finn and Poe, Kylo, whoever survives the you know, the Skywalker saga. And yeah, that would be cool.
Hey, by the way, just thought of this. Let me check in with you on the TV spot situation. Are you watching them? Are you avoiding them? Are you not paying attention? Like, where are you at with that?
I think I've only seen one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the Finn one that maybe went up today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might not have seen that one, but there's a recent one where Poe Dameron's got a great exchange with Princess Leia, which you should definitely check out if you haven't seen it yet. And then I think Wednesday or Thursday night, a 60-second TV spot went live, and it's got more dialogue with Luke and Rey, and that one's pretty great. So yeah, I don't know. I know in years past, like a lot of Star Wars fans, sometimes like in these last couple weeks before the movie comes out, they get a little timid about watching too many more TV spots and trailers and stuff like that. So I don't know if you were there or if you're, full blast with just watching whatever, or where you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll watch them if they pop up in my feed or something, but I'm definitely not seeking anything extra out.
You're not like me where you're refreshing making Star Wars like 20 times a day waiting for like a picture
I was doing that before we got the trailer.
Yeah.
And then now like I'm just kind of I don't know.
Yeah, you're more relaxed about it. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, anything else on the topic, Ryan, of the Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy on the way? Or should we move on to the TV show?
Yeah, let's go to the TV show.
Okay, there's going to be one. It's going to be a live action Star Wars show. Bob Iger announced the same day as this Rian Johnson trilogy, and it's going to be on Disney's own streaming service in 2019. Well, the streaming service is coming in 2019. I don't know that a date has been committed to for live action Star Wars show, but I would guess 2019, 2020. So there's not a lot of information about this, so it's definitely more of a speculation thing. I would like to see. I think with a live action TV show, Rogue One is the first thing that came to mind to me. Not that I want a Rogue One TV show, but that like Rogue One would be the kind of thing that could work as a TV show, like a group of characters that don't necessarily have, super force powers. And it's not this necessarily this epic, like, galactic conflict spanning, like huge thing, but more like a story about a team of characters or something like that would, lend itself more to like episodic TV. That's kind of what I'm thinking. The direction they'll go in. It also seems like that would be like something like Rogue One would be a little cheaper to make too for a TV show type thing. But what are your thoughts for a live action show from Star Wars?
Well, like I said, I think MedStar battle surgeons would be my dream, I guess.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, that's kind of like, that sounds like you're coming from a similar place that I am, which is you don't want a TV show about like, 100 Jedi running around just being awesome Jedi every week or something, right?
Well, like, yeah, I don't want Clone Wars live action.
Right. A TV show should be, I think, a little more grounded. That makes more sense, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like you added some stuff about Knights of the Old Republic here.
Oh yeah,
notes. Was that you?
Yeah, yeah, that was me. Yeah, the TV show could be Knights of the Old Republic.
Well, let me tell our listeners and viewers how you put this in the notes. What do we want? Knights of the Old Republic. Where could it go wrong not being Knights of the Old Republic?
Yeah, I guess I did put that in there because to counteract your KOTOR hate.
Yeah, we had a little bit of an exchange on the morning after this news was released, because I was being decidedly anti Knights of the Old Republic as a direction for a Star Wars movie or TV show. So I was being a little curmudgeon-y about it, I guess you'd say. I like the idea of the era. I just don't like the idea of it being too closely associated with previous like source material in that realm. But
I don't think it would be.
I don't think it would be either. I think we that's kind of where our conversation ended. Is I think we all agree on that. It probably is not likely to be based on that stuff. But I think there's a big segment of the fan community out there that really wants it to be. And I think that's tricky because if they do something set in that era, but it's really different from, or not even really different, but just not associated with what's come before. I don't know. There's going to be some, I feel like there's going to be some Knights of the Old Republic drama regardless of what they do at this point.
Oh yeah. But I also think of it like the same way as like they've handled Thrawn. Because I think like those are the two strongest contingents of Star Wars EU fans are the KOTOR fans and the Zahn trilogy fans. And like Mara Jade and all of that. Like I feel like they addressed the Thrawn trilogy by, bringing Thrawn into Rebels and then releasing the novel, and there's a second novel on the way, and there's a comic adaptation coming. And people seem to be happy with that. I haven't seen I'm sure there's probably like petitions or something somewhere, but I think overall, I think the Star Wars community kind of accepted that as an olive branch
in
a way. And I wonder if but yeah, like the Old Republic era it's never been adapted to film, or like there's never been like an animated TV series. I guess the games are kind of they're pretty mainstream, but I don't know.
Well, I don't know much about Knights of the Old Republic. I just remember in 2014 and 2015, before The Force Awakens came out, I would always have students being like, "Oh yeah, that it's for sure going to be Darth Revan as the bad guy." And I don't know, it just seemed to be like there was a lot of people who, even with The Force Awakens, assumed like it's going to definitely have a bunch of stuff from Knights of the Old Republic. And
yeah,
I don't think that was logical, but it was a widely held belief, at least with like maybe younger Star Wars fans. So I don't know. But with the way they've done like Thrawn and the Rebel stuff, and even maybe a good analog is the Fantasy Flight Games stories and stuff. Like they've done a lot to integrate elements of stuff from like even the old RPG games into Rebels in a way that like fans of that stuff will notice and appreciate, but it's certainly not based on that source material. It's just they'll pull things from it, and so maybe they would do something like that if it was set in that era. Like they would get character designs or ship designs and stuff like that, and kind of put those things in there as a nod to the original stuff, but not necessarily adapt the original stories in any way. So
yeah. I don't know, but yeah, as far as like what the TV show, it's kind of that the same thing as the trilogy, like or like the saga films, like, or the story films. Like, I'm pretty much okay with whatever if it's good. But I think the TV show definitely should would be cool to have something a little more grounded.
Yeah. Have you watched much of Rebels this season?
No.
Okay.
We only started the season.
Okay.
Gonna catch up this week though.
Cool. Yeah. It's only 9 episodes, so if you saw even the first 2, you don't have that much to catch up on so far, but I love season 1 of Star Wars Rebels, which is very grounded in Lothal, and there's not a lot of trying to traverse the entire Star Wars galaxy. And season 4 is going back in that direction, it seems like, to be sort of centered around one location. And I think that, a TV show like Star Wars Rebels, a cartoon, a smaller setup like that, I think it just works better to have it more grounded in one location and to have it more just a streamlined and more simple sort of setup. So I think it needs to be that. I think that'll work the best, and that could be cool. But other than that, yeah, I'm open to a lot of different things too. But I'm certainly excited. How do you feel about the whole streaming service aspect of it?
I'm fine with that. I'll pay for a Disney streaming service. Like there's enough Disney stuff that I'm
also fine with it and kind of excited about it, truth be told. And, Bob Iger was quoted as saying that it'll be priced substantially less than Netflix. So sounds good to me.
Super cheap.
Yes. If it's like in between like $5 and $10 a month, probably would be less than $10 a month, maybe like more like $5 or $6 or $7 a month. Perfect.
Yeah. Having like Marvel movies, there's Star Wars content. I don't know if they would have like Studio Ghibli stuff there. And then like, classic Disney shorts and films and Pixar stuff. Like, I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah. And I love the idea of like a Star Wars tab or like a Star Wars channel within the app, that would have like just documentaries and bonus materials from the Blu-rays and,
like the WWE
interviews.
Network.
Well, I was gonna bring that up because you have recently subscribed to the WWE Network. I've been subscribing for a year or two now, at least 2 years probably. And I have never minded paying the $10 a month for that service because there's just so much stuff there. And it's just so much more convenient than trying to deal with like DVR or logging into an app through a cable subscription or whatever. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to send the idea that like I want to subscribe to 12 different $10 a month services or something.
Yeah.
But for Star Wars and wrestling, yeah, I'll give you $10 a month or less for like an incredible wealth of content, and easy access to it.
Totally.
So yeah, cool. Okay. Well, I mean, that was some huge news that has dropped and stuff that like I feel like we'll be talking about on this podcast for years to come. And there's not a lot of information out about any of it, so very speculative, but fun to discuss and to take some guesses about. But the other thing that's a pretty big event in the Star Wars fan community here is the fact that Battlefront 2 is out, and we both have it. You've been playing it a little bit longer than me, but we've both been playing it, and definitely want to share our first impressions of that too.
And I think even like kind of setting the stage, it would be kind of remiss not to mention the controversy,
the drama,
and the change. Literally like last hour, 2 hours before the game launched, huge significant change.
Yeah. Well, so the controversy was that it was pretty heavily focused on microtransactions, right? Buying credits in order to get loot drops, basically, to try to improve your stats and to unlock characters and stuff like that. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, it was based as like the game's progression was based on what is essentially, people say gambling. Yeah, I guess. But I mean, I guess it's gambling in the same way that like buying packs of Pokemon cards is gambling, which was, I remember that being like a complaint in the early 2000s from like angry parents and stuff. But, you're essentially paying for these loot boxes that will, you click on them and open them up, and there will be potentially like some credits in there, potentially like a skin or emote for your characters, or it could be like an additional hero character to play as, which are apparently pretty rare, or it could be better weapons with better stats and such. So loot boxes or card packs or whatever have been around in games for a while, and like one of the biggest games out right now is Overwatch, which has that sort of progression system in it, and I feel like it kind of just reached a tipping point with Battlefront 2, and I think in Overwatch and such, and a lot of those kind of games, the digital items you can acquire are based more around cosmetic elements, and this is kind of like more of a, I guess, pay to win kind of thing, where it kind of takes an element of skill out of the game in the multiplayer space, because you could be lucky or you could be not lucky to get the best weapons, and someone who just puts in hundreds of dollars into the game could potentially get the best weapons, or they could not, like,
yeah,
kind of thing. So it just created a pretty uncomfortable situation, and there was significant outcry from the gaming space, which is not new. There's significant outcry from the gaming space about once a week, but I think this time it reached a different level, to the point where like major news outlets were covering it,
yeah,
and it quickly turned into a narrative that I don't believe Disney appreciated, which was hashtag Disney gambling.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's where it kind of hit that tipping point, that cultural.
There were rumors about Bob Iger making a phone call to EA saying like, this is not a good look for anybody involved.
Yeah.
It turns out, I think via Wall Street Journal or someone like that it was a different VP at Disney, not quite like not actually Bob Iger.
Yeah.
But that the phone call was made, it sounds like. Hey, and it's not good for the brand. I mean, and the funny thing is too, it's like, well, okay, Disney licenses Star Wars to EA and EA creates the game, but like, not that Disney's uninvolved necessarily, but I would think some of these calls these are EA calls, not Disney calls, in terms of microtransactions and stuff like that. But that relationship is not necessarily totally understood by consumers, and it does reflect badly on Disney if the perception is that there's this great new Star Wars product, but it's all about fleecing Star Wars fans. That's not a good thing. I would say, like, I'm not an expert on this stuff at all, and I'm not great at this kind of game, and I'm never really one to dive into microtransactions anyway. So I always feel like, or I have always felt about this topic, like I don't really know enough to say much. But what I can say about Battlefront 2 is that, on the one hand, I feel like this is good because it's kind of like a win for the consumer. Like the consumer made his or her voice known and a company responded. And so rather than people being taken advantage of potentially, they were able to say like, hey, we're not happy with this. And EA responded. And so that's kind of cool. On the other hand, part of me thinks like it was a little bit blown out of proportion. It wasn't really the scandal that it was presented to be. And then, it didn't change necessarily based on valid reasons. It changed because there was just like a hysterical outcry. One thing Kevin brought up, and Kevin couldn't be here with us today either, but one thing he brought up recently was like with Battlefront 1, if you wanted to get all the content, like storyline and maps and all that stuff, you had to like pay for DLC. And with Battlefront 2, you're not paying for DLC. So it was kind of like they changed the model where, hey, you buy the game, you get all the core content, like the main stuff for one price. But then if you want to do these star cards and some of these things are, to me, again, I'm not an expert on this style of game or this type of like, transaction system in games, but like to me it seems like stuff that you don't really need, but that you could choose to go after. So like I kind of like that model better anyway, personally. I mean, I guess this model's good because you can't do microtransactions at the moment. Like you can't give them more money, so they're not getting more money out of you except for the price of the game. So that's nice too. But I don't know. I guess I was okay, and I'm still okay. But maybe it's probably a good thing for consumers, I guess. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I actually like this this sort of model a lot. Like two of my three favorite like online games, Halo 5 and Overwatch, both have this sort of system where like content is rolled out. Like in Overwatch, you get new maps, new characters. Those are just rolled out. And then you have the option to, you get a loot crate every time you level up. And then, but you, or you can buy them. Yeah. So you level up just by playing the game. And then in Halo 5, it's card packs that give you that you can use like mid-match and stuff to get like a bring out a vehicle at a certain point, have it spawn with you when you die or whatever, or get it from a terminal in Warzone. But in both of those games, like, I play those games a decent amount, and I've never actually spent the money or really ever even thought about it.
Yeah.
So like, but then I also like, I take advantage of like the new content, and the reason I keep going back to those games is because they're like always fresh, and there's always something new there, a new mode or a new map or something. And but I'm also not making, Blizzard or 343 and Microsoft, I'm not making them any money really, because I just purchased the game and haven't bought anything since. But some people are buying that, which are funding my my free maps.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I don't know how to feel exactly, because on the one hand, like, the model works well for me, or it seemed like it would have worked fine for me and actually be good for me. But then on the other hand, like, I guess there is the realization in the back of your mind that the reason it works for all parties involved, or the reason it's working for me, is because there are those whales out there that are going to spend $500 over the course of their time in this game. And like, that's not a great feeling to think about the fact that like some people, I mean, it's their choice, but at the same time, it does seem kind of exploitative on the part of a game developer to say, well, if you want to give us $500 for playing this one video game, we're going to let you do it. It just seems excessive. And 500 is probably a conservative number to throw out too, potentially with some of the microtransaction systems. I will say too, real quick, before we like start talking about the actual game, I have seen through anecdotal evidence like quite a few people in the last few days sort of suggesting they're not going to get the game. And so I do think that this was getting away from them, and they had to do something, because where I'm at with the game right now, I've not played nearly as much as you, but like, I feel like this should be a celebration right now, because the game is gorgeous, and my limited time I've spent with it is really fun, and it's like, it's a cool Star Wars game with a ton of like, it's spanning all these different Star Wars eras, and it's got a ton of characters and locations and vehicles and weapons and settings, and just like, it's so cool. It's such a fun, like, crazy content heavy like Star Wars video game sandbox thing that's just like really fun. So it's a little bit of a bummer that like something that's like as technically as impressive and as like full of content as Battlefront 2 is, like, right now the prevailing discussion around it seems to be like pretty negative, and I feel kind of bad about that. Like, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, and I mean, this is definitely affected like the critical perception of the game as well. I think that was also like probably was part of the conversation between Disney and EA. And like, a lot of the reviews I read kind of, cited, in addition to like, like, there's definitely some things that are very praiseworthy of for this game. There are some flaws to it as well, but I think it was kind of scored lower, despite being a more expansive game than the original. It was kind of scored lower based on the microtransaction issues, and certainly from a consumer standpoint, because the game currently has a 72 on Metacritic, which is pretty much exactly the same score as the
first one.
the original. And but the user score is 0.8.
Wow.
And I mean, and then you can also look at stuff like the initial EA response to the kind of microtransaction issue is like the most downvoted comment ever on Reddit.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the internet is at. With this.
Well, I always wonder how many people leaving those comments or voting on things or whatever have actually even played the game too, or if it's just like, it's just about the negativity. You know what I mean?
I mean, definitely. I'm sure most of those people have not played the game.
Right. Well, so let's talk about because we probably, have people listening that are on the fence about getting the game, and you've played a bunch of it. I've played a little bit. Let's talk about for instance, the campaign. That's the big difference between this one and the first Battlefront, right? Is that it has this campaign. Now you've played through the entire campaign?
Yes.
Okay, you finished it. So, what are your feelings on it after having played it? Was it fun? Is the story, pretty decent, substantial? Was it a good experience playing through that campaign, or where did you land on it?
Kind of in the middle. I was very impressed by the variety in production values in the first few missions. And then kind of the more, and I mean, I guess I should put this into context, this game centers around Inferno Squadron, specifically Iden Versio, and as who are characters I'm pretty invested in and interested in after reading the book, that the Christie Golden book that came out a few months ago. And so I knew these characters. I was pretty invested in their story, but I feel like their story was good. I feel like it was well written, it's a good arc. My kind of issue where I kind of come down on it, I think at the end, is none of the story beats are given a chance to breathe. So there's actions that have huge consequences and that leave you with a ton of questions, and the game doesn't even give you a second to think on that or to address some of because there becomes some glaring wait, if that happened, then why wouldn't blank? There become a lot of those sort of questions, and the game, it almost feels like the game design is just meant to distract you from thinking about that, because they'll throw a revelation at you and you're like, oh wow, crazy. So then that means, and it's well, nope, now we're on this pretty new planet and there's 8,000 stormtroopers shooting at you. No time to think about that. Just start firing.
Yeah.
It almost feels like that in a way. So the story just didn't end up sitting really well with me. There's definitely some cool moments, and I think the arc overall is good. I think it is a well written game, and the cutscenes are amazing. They look so good in the motion capture, and I feel like there's a lot of heart and passion put into it, but it's almost in conflict with the gameplay, which quickly kind of just always sort of is you're at a new location, now here's a shooting gallery of 1,000 dudes you got to shoot, or
I think that makes sense. I haven't played that much of the campaign, but I think that makes sense if you consider okay, well, it's basically an online multiplayer game. which is why the first one didn't even have like a single player mode. So then they're going to put a single player mode in the second one, and they're going to bring in some writers to come up with hopefully a pretty cool story. But basically it's I'm guessing, you know, for the most part, it's like cutscenes, you know, with like sort of single player versions of the multiplayer like Battlefront game sandwiched in between, you know what I mean? To like basically, right? So it's like versus you know, if they sat down to make a single player game and tell a cool story and then like also do cool things with the gameplay, and it would be a little more organic and fit together probably better than if it's like, all right, well, people want a single player campaign, so we're going to take the gameplay from, you know, the game that exists and then, you know, tie that into like a narrative somehow. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think like they hinted at that that sort of more ideal and organic design at the beginning of the game. Like I think the, you know, kind of the stealth sort of mission at the very beginning and like kind of the slow burn there, like that I think was really cool, and it like the game makes a really strong first impression. And then it kind of, I don't know, it almost delves into like sort of just what the arcade mode is, essentially, which is cool, and I like the arcade mode like as a distraction or something else to do, but it's definitely not a solid foundation for the type of storytelling they were going for. I think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I like the original Battlefront, but I'm not like a huge online person, like for especially for shooting games, because I'm not good at them at all. So, you know, I think I'm probably going to be like okay with it being similar gameplay and just, you know, like it's not even the story necessarily that I'm as concerned about. It's just like a better way for me to play through this kind of game is like a single player kind of drawn along through a narrative. But, you know, that's a little more probably what I'm hoping for. Although I think, you know, that criticism makes sense, and it could obviously be more if it was designed as more of a unique, like I'm even thinking of the missions that I've played through. I've only played through the first 3, I think, but like it is just like big sequence. And, you know, why not have like more exploration or more kind of, and that could be very narrative driven too. If I have to like, if it takes me 15 minutes to get from one big sequence to the next, and I'm like, you know, finding keys or having to figure out a way to like, you know, bring down some shield or I don't know, whatever it is that doesn't just involve combat. Like, I could see where maybe it would feel more like I don't know, just a more satisfying gameplay experience than just like here's a crazy action sequence, now a quick conversation, then another crazy action sequence. Cause that's what it's felt like to me so far.
Yeah. And it's incredibly linear. I know we had talked before, like prior to the release of the game, like how, you know, like our favorite Star Wars games are, you know, we like to go back and revisit and replay. And I don't know, I can't really ever see myself replaying the single player campaign because there are parts that are just simply not fun in there that were like really annoying. And also like there's really like, because if you even get like slightly off course, like it's just like in the multiplayer mode, it's like return to the battlefield 10 9
I did
8,
notice that,
like, and it's like, man, this is really oppressive.
Well, are there memorable missions where, you know, you might want to go back and do certain chapters like over again, do you think, or would that be weird? Because I know you can choose like to go back and do any chapter that you've already played through. So even if the entire like, you know, narrative sequence or whatever is not something you'd want to revisit, like, oh, I remember that Fondor level is really cool, I'll go back and do that one today or something.
Yeah,
because that's kind of how Shadows of the Empire is. Like, some of it you would not really want to play again.
You kind of play through the first like 3 or 4 stages in Shadows, and then you're like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
It's usually like once I get to the train, I'm like, I'm good. No, I don't know. maybe. I think it will always be like, I mean, there might be, it's kind of one of those games like you bust out to be like, hey, video games are crazy looking, like, especially like I'm playing it on the Xbox One X, on a 4K TV, and I mean it looks insane. Like it's probably like, I mean, not maybe not like art design wise, but it's probably the best looking video game I've ever played at this point in time. And I'm like, that will change in 3 months from now, I'm sure, because that's just how the video game industry works. But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly impressive, and like the motion capture and stuff is great. But I don't know, it's just kind of ended up kind of, I mean, maybe it was also like I had high expectations going into it, and having read the book and also being a fan of one of the like lead writers on the game, Walt Whitman, who had done Spec Ops: The Line. Like I really, really had high expectations, and just didn't quite get there. But something like I do know is there is more single player content coming, which is good because the ending is horrible. And like a really obvious like cliffhanger.
Kind of not actually the ending, sort of.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, okay.
yeah, and which also feels a little bit weird, and that also feels more kind of rooted in sort of the maybe somewhat slimy marketing side of things, because that's the thing with games these days. Everyone is shooting for that that long-term model.
Yeah, don't trade it in and all that.
Yeah, don't sell it. Keep playing. Maybe throw us a few bucks here and there, like down the road. Like, oh, we got an expansion pass. We got new DLC coming.
At least that stuff is free for this game, though. But yeah, but I can see.
Yeah,
I mean, like, they're hoping you're gonna get loot crates and all that stuff as you keep.
Yeah, and just don't sell this game. Yeah.
Right.
And
although with Star Wars, though, it is like they're so secretive about things, and I think like some of that story sequence, like some of that stuff, like isn't crate involved, I think, in what's coming in December for the single player and stuff like that. So there is that element of it too. I think they can bring like Last Jedi content into it if they hold off, and I'm excited about that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, like the next single player stuff drops on like December 13th.
Yeah.
So it's and I think that's cool. Like I think that's actually really fun. Like I like the way I like that model, and I like going back to a game and not feeling like, well, I guess I'm kind of done with this now. I guess I'll just sell it.
Yeah.
Which also isn't like a great feeling either. It's cool to like always be like, oh, there's going to be something else down the road. So
what I'm hoping for out of the single player is that it can kind of teach me how to play the game a little bit, because I got Battlefront 1, and I don't, like I said a couple times, I'm not good at it, and I don't ever play games in this style or genre, so I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm actually struggling like a little bit with the single player. I don't know if you had that experience or not, but I just have it on like the normal difficulty. I haven't dropped it to the easier difficulty, and like I've struggled a bit. Like I've had some difficulties. So yeah. But I'm hoping it'll teach me how to play the game better, so that maybe when I'm done with the single player, I will be more interested in going in and doing, more multiplayer and online stuff and that kind of thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like the game is like there are. Like I feel like there were just some like really huge difficulty spikes in the game, and I think the difficulty spikes aren't like they don't they don't really come in an organic way where like you're like, oh, I've mastered these skills, so like I'm ready to take on this challenge. It's more just like just getting like overrun with enemies.
Yeah.
Kind of where they just throw so many enemies at you from all directions, that you just, and then like it's kind of that thing where, okay, then you die and then you have to go back to a checkpoint and then you hear the same dialogue over again. And like, as beautiful as the game is, like nothing kind of pulls you out of the immersion faster than that, and hearing the same lines of dialogue over and over again. And there were like a few points where I hit that roadblock, and it's not super fun.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. But with me being like knowing nothing about this kind of game, like I do feel like I know the controls better already than I did on Battlefront 1 than I ever did on Battlefront 1, even though I've played, that game more than I've played this one, but just like because I have to do stuff for the single player. I don't know. So far my experience with it's been pretty cool. I'm into it. But I'm somebody who's going into it thinking like, I don't play this kind of game, I'm not good at this kind of game, and knowing that I'll have some struggles. Like, so that's probably, I'm not comparing it to other games in the genre because I've never really played any other, not never, but like I don't play other games in the genre. So like to me, it's a whole different thing, So, but I played some of the single player. I'm going to keep doing that obviously over the next few days, or probably take me a week or two at least to finish it. Because I'm not good. But I played the arcade mode for like an hour this morning with my son, and we did like 2-player arcade mission stuff. That was really fun, I thought. And that is the kind of thing where it's almost like a party game or something. Like we did a thing today where I was Yoda and he was Darth Maul, and we were just like running around Theed Palace, like seeing who could kill the other person 5 times faster, Yeah. Like, and it looks so gorgeous, and it's just it feels so like they did such a good job of capturing like everything like Star Wars wise in terms of location and music and look and all that. Like it's just, it's, I mean, what a great thing to be able to do. Like, oh, do you want to like pick up 2 controllers and like just fight with lightsabers, and it's going to look amazing, and you just do it for 10 minutes or whatever. And there's quite a few different arcade missions, and you can set up your own game, like in terms of location and what you want the rules to be and how many enemies and all that. Like there's a lot there in the arcade mode that's really fun, I think, in terms of just a lot to do, and like pretty good replay ability. And then 2, with like the multiplayer, I haven't even touched it yet. I haven't even gone and done multiplayer, but I if it's like the first Battlefront, which I know that it is, I think there's going to be a lot of fun to be had there too. At least in the 8-on-8 mode. That's the one I like more so, because I don't get slaughtered immediately, and there's like an objective beyond just killing, like in the 20-on-20. So I think I'll have fun with that too. And then with the I forget exactly what they're calling it, but I think it's like the season of The Last Jedi or whatever it is, with like all the content that's coming starting in December for Last Jedi. I don't know. To me, to pay like $50-$60 for this game, if you have a next gen system or a current gen system and you can play it, like, and you're a big Star Wars fan. I don't play these kind of games. I'm not good at these kind of games. I'm not going to spend 100 hours playing multiplayer, like getting really good at it or whatever. It's still easily worth $50 or $60 to me. Like, I think it's a no brainer personally. But like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty from people that I've seen, people I know that are like, I don't know if I want to get it or not. So, which is fair, but I'm definitely very happy with the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just from what I've played of the multiplayer, expect essentially, what we got from the original Battlefront. It's, pretty similar, not anything to game changing there. I think,
you see yourself playing for like sticking with it and playing fairly regularly, or no?
I think I'll probably play it socially. So with Kevin, because we're both on Xbox. But I don't, I think like I don't, I like, and I think I'll definitely like whenever there's new content, like be checking that out and stuff, and kind of keep getting pulled back to it. But I think at the end of the day, like when I think of like other online games that I go and just play like a few rounds of, like stuff like Splatoon or Destiny or Overwatch or Halo, I feel like those are more, will probably remain my go-tos, and just because I enjoy those systems more, and I feel like I can hang more in those games than like the Battlefront series, which is based very heavily on like the Battlefield series, which is one that like I never really was able to get into, because it always just the large scale battles and everything just were never really my thing. But no, I think I'll keep like picking away at it. I don't think like I'll go like totally all in. Like I haven't really been hooked. And I've been opening my crates and everything as I earn them. But I'm not like, I don't feel, which is weird because it's Star Wars. But I don't feel super invested in like the economy and the progression system or anything. Like I'm like weirdly more interested in, like I get more excited about like Overwatch skins than skins here, which is weird because I care way more about Star Wars as like a universe. But I think it's just it's all in like the presentation and like everything, and I don't know, it's maybe I'll get into it, but I'm definitely gonna keep going at the single player content as it's released. I think the sort of choosing light side or dark side could be interesting with the kickoff to the Last Jedi stuff, and that's sort of how that all plays out. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it hooks me and becomes like, if it gets into the rotation, or not. But I mean, kind of like after I finished the campaign today,
you're not chomping at the bit to jump back into it right away?
No, I switched over and played something else. So
gotcha.
I don't know, but overall, like I think time will tell. Like I think it's definitely like the disc you get on day one is definitely better than the disc you got on day one of Star Wars Battlefront.
Yeah.
The original. Like, I mean, I think like even though the single player mode I found ultimately somewhat disappointing, the fact that it's even there and there are like some cool moments in it and stuff, I think goes a long way. And I think like the locations and stuff for the multiplayer maps are really cool. But with the original Star Wars Battlefront, the best content came in the DLC. And I think Scarif in particular is like the best stuff in Star Wars Battlefront, and I feel like no one played that because it came so late, and most people had like already sold their copy of the game, and most people didn't want to pay $50 for a season pass.
Yeah.
In addition to a $60 game. Or maybe it was even, I think it was $50 for that season pass. So.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna keep playing Battlefront 2, and I'll check back in probably at some point in the show, and maybe we'll talk a little more in detail about the story once it's been out there for a little while.
I would love to do a spoiler cast on it because I have some thoughts.
Cool. Yeah. You know what? As we wrap up here, that just reminded me, Ryan, I meant to talk to you about Zen Pinball FX2 coming to Switch, Nintendo Switch. Did you see that they put out an update? They delayed it a little bit, but one of the reasons is that they are enabling a vertical mode using only one Joy-Con, so you can like have your Switch like in vertical mode, and then just have like the one Joy-Con at the bottom and use that for controls and stuff. Like, sounds really cool, and there's there's some great Star Wars tables in that game on the other platforms, so I'm assuming those will come to Switch too. So if you have a Nintendo Switch, that could be probably the only way you're going to be playing Star Wars on your Nintendo Switch anytime soon. So but I'm excited about that. And then I just wanted to point out real quick, I was lucky enough that a friend of the show, Jeremy, recently was at the Disney store, and he picked up for me the I forget what it's called, but they have like these sets of these like statue, like little statue figures.
Yep.
Yeah, he got me the Last Jedi one. It comes with a really cool Snoke, a Praetorian Guard, Phasma, a bunch of characters, Luke, Rey, everybody. Rose. But they're so cool. I'm just kind of like holding them up to the camera.
I have that set too from the Disney store, and like it's shocking for like it was like relatively affordable.
I think it's like $25, but it's like at least 8 characters or something.
I think it's like 11. Like it's a lot, ridiculous. And like some of them obviously look better than others, but like overall, like it's a really cool package.
And you know what they have, like, to me, they have like a little bit of a Christmas ornament look, and I love that. Like they kind of look like Hallmark ornaments or something, but they're just little statues. So they're populating my desk right now. I've got all these Last Jedi figures like all over the desk. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Because to buy, I think it might be 10 figures. To get 10 action figures, you're talking like $80 or something, but this is like $25, and it's really cool. So and if you go on the Disney Store website and just check out like all the Last Jedi merch they have, there's a lot of cool Last Jedi stuff from Disney Store and from elsewhere. So so I throw that out there real quick as we wrap up, but we should wrap up at this point, I think. So we are coming up on 3 weeks until The Last Jedi.
Less than a month.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Very exciting times. Very, very exciting times. So, we'll definitely be back doing more Blockade Runner podcast soon, and probably all throughout the month of December and beyond. So this is where the fun begins. But until next time, you can check us out at blockaderunnerpodcast.com, and you can email us at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Blockade Run, Instagram, The Blockade Runner, and I got it this time. Ryan, you're on Twitter at
Brawn Dwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
Yeah, so thanks very much for tuning in to check out our thoughts on Rian Johnson's new trilogy of movies, live action Star Wars, and Battlefront 2, even if we're a little late to the party on a couple of those things. But yeah, like I said, those are going to be issues, or not issues, but that's going to be subject matter that's going to
possibly issues. There could be issues.
Knights of the Old Republic issues, I'm anticipating. Yeah, that's going to be an issue. If you think that Reddit AMA on Battlefront 2 was bad, just wait until they announce it is or is not Knights of the Old Republic. Anyway, thanks very much for listening or watching, and stay tuned at blockaderunnerpodcast.com, and we will see you very soon.